The GBA's RPG library gets reduced to Pokemon and the Final Fantasy ports too often, because that's just the surface level. Go deeper, and you find a staggering catalog of tactical RPGs, original JRPGs, and genre experiments that were ambitious far beyond what the hardware suggested was possible. These are those games that never got the flowers they deserved simply because the PS2 lived in millions of living rooms, and an unwritten rule had quietly taken over the entire games industry. Everything had to be in 3D. Sword of Mana is the unusual entry here, not because it doesn't belong, but because its history makes it stranger than it looks. This is a full rebuild of Final Fantasy Adventure, the 1991 Game Boy game that quietly founded the Mana series before it was called that. This reconstructs it from the ground up. New visuals, redesigned mechanics, dual protagonists with separate storylines, a combat system in line with the rest of the lineage. On paper, that sounds like exactly what a classic like this deserves. In practice, it's complicated. The dual protagonist structure adds real weight. Playing as the female lead reframes the story in ways that go deeper than the original game ever bothered to. And there are moments that are very touching. The pixel art is some of the most lush on the GBA. This is a beautiful game, but the action combat is floaty in ways that disrupt the flow during longer dungeons. The difficulty spikes erratically in the late game. Players who came in expecting Secret of Mana pacing found something rougher and less polished than they hoped. I found this in a bargain bin years after release and appreciated it more than I expected, mostly because I came in with adjusted expectations. Sword of Mana is a flawed, underappreciated remake that's worth your time specifically if you have any attachment to where the series started. Go in knowing it's imperfect. It still has things worth seeing. Summon Night. Swordcraft's story has maybe the best elevator pitch on the entire GBA. You're a young craftsman. In this world, the weapons you forge are alive. The crafting system runs everything. You collect materials from battles, bring them back to your workshop, and design blades, hammers, and lances with properties that matter in combat. But a weapon isn't just a stick with stats here. Specific ones evolve with use. The ones you invest in get stronger, develop personality, build history with you. Alongside this, you have a guardian beast, a summoned companion who fights beside you, and the one you choose at the start shifts how the game plays in meaningful ways. The combat is real-time, which made it fairly unusual on the GBA in 2006. Fast, accessible, satisfying in the way that games built around one focused loop can be. You fight, collect materials, build something better, take on harder enemies. The loop is clean, and it doesn't overstay itself. What actually surprised me was how much personality this game has. The writing is warm without trying hard. The characters have real chemistry. This isn't a game that takes itself too seriously, and that lightness is part of why it works. In terms of negatives, the world is small and the story is light. If you need narrative depth and scale to stay engaged, Swordcraft's story will feel thin. But as a pure, focused experience, as a weekend RPG you just sink into, one of the most purely fun games on this system. Riviera: The Promised Land does something almost no RPG has the confidence to do. It limits you. You have a fixed inventory. Items break permanently with use. You can't grind your way past difficult encounters. Every resource decision carries weight, and the game uses that weight to make you feel every battle rather than cruise through on stats alone. The structure is deliberately linear. The devs lean into that linearity to tell a tight, mythology-heavy story about angels, duty, and what it means to choose between obedience and your own conscience. The atmosphere of the game is also special. The art direction is stunning for the hardware. This feels like a visual novel that learned how to fight. The relationship system tracks your interactions with party members and shifts how the story develops. Characters have opinions about your choices, and those opinions go somewhere. That kind of character-driven narrative design was ahead of its time on this hardware. I went into this with a curiosity for the hidden and came out having felt something I didn't anticipate. But the pacing can be a little slow, which is by design. The limited movement and combat structure will read as restrictive to players expecting a traditional RPG. It's closer to a visual novel with tactical combat, and if you go in expecting something more action-heavy, you'll bounce off immediately. Frame it correctly, and it clicks in a way not many GBA games do. Strange, beautiful, and almost nobody talks about it. That's exactly why it's here. There are handheld games, and then there are games that make you put the system down and stare at the wall for a second because you can't believe what you just saw running on hardware that fits in your pocket. Golden Sun is the second kind. Camelot built this like they had something to prove. The world feels like the best parts of classic-era Final Fantasy had a baby with something warmer and more personal. A sweeping adventure with a party you actually come to care about. But the centerpiece is the Djinn system. Elemental spirits scattered across the world that you collect, assign to party members, and stack to unlock summons. The summon animations that hit the screen, full screen, dramatic, technically stunning, with the kind of thing people would physically hand the GBA to friends just to watch. That moment when Ramses appears for the first time still lands. It shouldn't still land. It does. What separates Golden Sun from other JRPGs of the era is that your magic isn't just a combat tool. Synergy, the game's spell casting, works in the field. You move boulders with it, grow vines, reveal hidden paths. The world actively responds to your abilities in ways most JRPGs still don't bother with. I remember playing this in a car on a cloudy day, squinting at the screen and refusing to stop. The music through those tiny mono speakers hit in a way I still can't fully explain. Fair warning. The story cuts off mid-arc. Golden Sun is part one of something, and you'll feel that ending. It doesn't diminish what's here. It just means you're starting the sequel immediately. If Golden Sun made you a believer, The Lost Age is where that belief gets rewarded. Camelot took everything from the first game, doubled it, and then added something that remains one of the most ambitious things I've seen on a handheld. Link your cartridges with a GBA cable and transfer your save data and the choices you made in the first carryover. Party composition, items, completion percentage. In 2003, on a device that ran on double the batteries. The scale opens up in ways the first game only gestured at. Towns have actual history. Dungeons feel designed for players who've committed to the long haul. The villain's motivation reframes things you thought you understood. The Djinn system expands, the summons get bigger, and the ambition gets louder. There's a sequence late in the game that still impresses me technically, and I've played it multiple times. But the real reason The Lost Age earns its own entry is the finale. I won't describe it. I just want you to get there. You'll have played 30-plus hours across 2 games, and Camelot uses that investment like they planned it from the beginning, because they did. The first stretch, however, assumes you remember everything from Game 1. There's no tutorial, no easing in. You're dropped back into this world and expected to keep up. It's the payoff the first game promised, and it absolutely delivers. If most of what we've covered has felt like reading a novel, Shining Soul 2 is the entry that throws the book out the window. This is the action RPG of the GBA library. The one that understood that sometimes you don't want story beats and tactical decisions. You want to enter a dungeon, hit things very hard, and come out the other side with better loot. Top-down, fast-paced, 8 playable character classes, deep equipment systems, and link cable co-op multiplayer that in 2003 felt genuinely ahead of what a handheld should be able to do. The moment-to-moment gameplay is fast and satisfying in a way that's hard to articulate but easy to feel. Each class plays differently enough that starting a run as a different character feels like a meaningfully fresh experience. The Dragon class has a transformation mechanic that changes your entire moveset mid-dungeon. I spent more time with that class than I should reasonably admit. The caveat is real. The story is thin to the point of near non-existence, and the dungeon design in the later half can feel repetitive if you're not fully invested in the loot loop. But it scratches an itch that almost nothing else on the GBA does. If you want to go fast, hit hard, and walk away an hour later feeling like you earned something, Shining Soul 2 is the one. And it flew completely under the radar. Okay, if you've been here this long, you clearly have taste. Genuine question for the comments. What was your first tactical RPG? Not your favorite, your first. The one that broke your brain and made you realize this genre existed. Drop it below. And if this kind of content is what you watch at midnight, subscribing keeps the channel running. It means I can keep making these. I genuinely appreciate it. Back to it. Fire Emblem had been running in Japan since 1990. 12 years, 7 games, a devoted fanbase, and not a single release outside Asia until 2003 when Nintendo looked at the West and finally decided we were ready. They were right. What this game represents is almost as interesting as what it actually is. The first time Western players got to understand why Fire Emblem was considered sacred. The answer is permanent death. When your units fall in battle, they're gone. Not unconscious, gone. No revival item and no resurrection mechanic. The only way to undo it is to reset the entire chapter and try again. That single design decision makes every engagement carry a weight that's genuinely hard to replicate. You don't care about these characters because the writing tells you to. You care about them because losing them costs you something real. The story follows 3 lords with intersecting fates, and while it's not the most complex narrative in the series, it earns its emotional moments honestly and doesn't overstay its welcome. I'll be straight with you. I reset chapters an embarrassing number of times on my first run. New permadeath was the rule. Still couldn't commit. It took me 2 full playthroughs to actually play it properly. There's a real issue though. This was designed as a soft reboot for new players, which means veterans of the Japan exclusive entries found it lighter than expected. For everyone else, it's a near-perfect entry point into one of gaming's great series. The genre finally had a Western door. It opened here. Sacred Stones came out 2 years later and made a decision that still divides the fanbase. It added an optional grinding mechanic to a series built on the assumption that you would never need one. The result is a game that's genuinely more accessible than its predecessor. And whether that's a good thing depends entirely on who you are. The story takes place on a new continent, following twins Irika and Ephraim, and it's one of the more emotionally grounded narratives in the GBA era. The villain has actual motivation. The supporting cast earns their moments. And the branching promotion system, where units evolve in one of 2 distinct directions at a key milestone, adds a layer of build crafting the first game didn't have. Deciding whether your thief becomes a rogue or an assassin, whether your mage goes sage or mage knight. These feel like real choices with real consequences. This is honestly where I stopped just reacting to Fire Emblem and started actually understanding it. The lighter difficulty curve gave me room to think instead of panic. The honest problem is the grind option. If you lean on it, it quietly deflates the tension that makes the series work. Some players will. And if you come in expecting the same white-knuckle pressure as the first GBA entry, Sacred Stones is warmer and more forgiving. But as a standalone tactical RPG, it's excellent. It just wants to be liked a little more than it should. Mother 3 never came west. Let me say that plainly, so you know exactly what this is. A Japan-only sequel to Earthbound that Nintendo has still, to this day, never officially translated, localized, or made available to Western audiences. There's a fan translation. It's remarkable work, and the game behind it is one of the most devastating things I've ever played. How Laboratory built something that doesn't operate by normal RPG logic. The combat uses a rhythm system where timed button presses in sync with each enemy's musical theme deal bonus combo hits. And every enemy has its own track you have to learn to read. The story begins as a warm, gentle coming-of-age tale set in a village untouched by the outside world. A family, a community, a sense of safety and belonging. and then it methodically, chapter by chapter, takes everything that Warmth built and dismantles it. Character by character, memory by memory. I played through the fan translation in a single weekend. I cried twice. I'm not embarrassed about that. The caveat is obvious. You need a fan patch to play this in English. Set it up on an emulator or a flash card and commit to it properly. It's worth whatever effort it takes. Mother 3 belongs in any conversation about the GBA's greatest achievements, not despite being Japan only, but in some strange way because of it. The fact that this level of craft never received a proper Western release is one of gaming's great ongoing injustices. Play it. You'll understand why this is where we ended. Most people know Tactics Ogre through Let Us Cling Together, the original or the PSP remake. If you know it, you know why it's considered one of the greatest tactical RPGs ever made. Knight of Lodis is the prequel, and almost nobody played it. That's the crime. This is a full Tactics Ogre game. The same deep class system, the same layered political storytelling, the same moral weight, compressed for a handheld without losing anything that made the series matter. You're following Alphonse Lower, a knight sent to investigate a cursed island. And what unfolds is a story with genuine consequences and a branching ending system built on something genuinely clever. Emblems. Actions you take in battle. How you fight, what you prioritize, whether you protect allies or race for objectives. Earn you emblems that track your alignment and push the narrative in different directions. The endings diverge in ways that feel earned. I replayed this twice specifically to see the alternate conclusion. The second ending hit harder, but the localization has its rough patches. Certain dialogue reads awkwardly, and a few mechanics are underexplained in ways that punish players who come in cold. The GBA version also moves slower than you might expect. Deliberate pacing is part of the design, but it takes adjustment. But if you love Let Us Cling Together, even a little, Knight of Lodis is the other half of that story. It's been sitting there for 20 years, waiting. Most games push the tactical RPG formula forward in predictable directions. Igdra Union pushes it somewhere nobody expected. The core mechanic is built around cards, but not the way you're imagining. Cards aren't random draws from a deck. They're commands. Each card you play activates a specific battlefield formation where your entire army engages simultaneously. The unit with the highest morale leads. Terrain bonuses, weapon triangles, and enemy weaknesses all factor in at once. The result is a combat system unlike anything else on the GBA. Chaotic on the surface, deeply strategic underneath, once you understand what's actually happening. And it is brutal. Igdra Union does not ease you in. Missions that look manageable will end in a total wipe if you've misjudged 3 moves ago. I lost the same map 4 times before I understood what I was supposed to be doing, and then it clicked. The mechanics that had been punishing me suddenly felt like tools. That specific click is one of my favorite gaming moments on this system. The story follows a princess leading an army to reclaim her kingdom, and it earns its drama in an earnest, operatic way that I found more affecting than I expected. The tutorial does not hold your hand nearly long enough. If you bounce off after the first 2 missions, go back and read specifically about the morale system. It reframes everything. Overlooked on GBA, but the PSP version got more attention. Still, the original has something the port doesn't quite capture. This is the entry where I have to be fair even when I'm not sure I want to be. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is divisive in ways that go beyond normal fandom discourse. Veterans of the original FFT, one of the most respected tactical RPGs ever made, looked at this follow-up and found something unexpected: a lighter tone, a colorful aesthetic, a child protagonist escaping into a fantasy world, and a laws system that restricts what you're allowed to do in battle. For them, it felt like a step backward at best, a betrayal at worst. They weren't entirely wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. What FFTA actually is, stripped of the baggage, is a deeply replayable tactical RPG with one of the most expansive job systems on the GBA. Over 300 missions, clan management that gives the experience a scope most handheld tactics games couldn't approach. And the laws system, frustrating on first contact, forces strategic thinking beyond just winning by attrition. You can't just smash through everything. You have to think about how you smash. The story is light. The tone is gentle. It knows exactly what it is. I put 60 hours into this one summer, and I have almost no regret about that. But it's not a replacement for FFT. If that's what you're looking for, you'll be disappointed. If you can meet it on its own terms, it's one of the best games on the system. Full stop. The Game Boy Advance existed for about 5 years before the DS arrived and made it feel obsolete. In that window, a specific kind of RPG found its last real home. The turn-based, story-driven, mechanically ambitious kind that the PS2 era had quietly decided wasn't commercially viable anymore. What that window produced was extraordinary, and most of it never got the attention it deserved. These games didn't get parades. Some barely got marketing. But they survived on cartridges in bargain bins in the memories of players who found them at exactly the right moment. Which one was yours? Drop it in the comments. And if this is what you want to see more of, subscribing makes a real difference. I appreciate it more than I can fit in an outro.